Real quick, time for devlog number 6, I think. Now, there's a lot of weird stuff to talk about this one. We'll get to the king in a minute, that's the big thing, but a few weapons have received buffs in some ways. The hammer is 20% faster, damage is the same. The hammer is probably the weapon, one of two weapons I see getting a lot of buffs / nerfs in the future because it's kind of always bordering on being completely useless and being a DPS machine at any given time. Right now, I thought it was a little underpowered in the later areas, so it got a, not a damage buff, but a cooldown buff. Or I guess debuff, since the point is it's faster now, 0.8 seconds instead of 1 full second. The Fleshhound King head has received both nerfs and debuffs. It does less damage per shot, but it has more ammo now. So its total amount of damage before you run out of ammo is technically more now, but it's less ammo efficient. The grenade has been debuffed damage-wise. It now does 9 damage per grenade instead of 12. Same ammo. And that's pretty much it. The revolver and saw blade launcher are both the same. The revolver is probably going to be the same for the entire game's lifespan since it's the base, weapon to compare everything else to. And the saw blade launcher, if I buffed it, it'd be broken, and if I debuffed it, it'd be useless. I think it's in the Goldilocks zone right now. There's one other weapon that's been debuffed, but we'll get into that in like 5 seconds. So I'm showing off Raid Cruncher here for one key reason. Now, one thing about Raid Cruncher, the only weapon that doesn't do increased damage to his heart is the hammer. The hammer does 5 damage to Raid Cruncher no matter where you hit him. That's because otherwise, in the original version of Raid Cruncher had 500 health, which means the hammer would kill him in 5 hits. Now it kills him in 7 hits. 8 hits, actually. He has 720 health, I think. 750 instead of 700, so it would technically take 8 hits, which is still ridiculous. Now, if you notice, some weapons have audio now. Most don't, but some do. Raid Cruncher now drops the chain gun. I was talking about in the previous devlog how I didn't know how to implement this thing because it's in a weird spot of being broken and not broken. So I gave it to Raid Cruncher, and it holds 50 rounds. It's essentially the replacement for your revolver. You'll go to the chain gun after you've run out of ammo for your other weapons or to conserve ammo. It's significantly better than the revolver, but in terms of pure DPS output, it's worse than the grenade, it's worse than the saw blade launcher, it's worse than the shotgun, which hasn't been fully implemented yet, and it's probably worse than the Fleshhound King head. I haven't tested the Fleshhound King head's debuffs enough to know for sure, but I'm pretty sure it's still worse than that. And if it's not, it's only slightly better than the Fleshhound King head. Let's go and talk to Notch just so I can have that on the save file. Yeah, 50 shots, which is not a lot, considering each bullet does 1 damage. Overall, I still think it's a good weapon, and I did decrease its fire rate to only being twice as good as the revolver, instead of 5 times as good. So yeah, now going over here, I'm going to show off the graveyard since the sewer is pretty much finished. I'm showing off the graveyard first because now these long hallway rooms in front of the sewer and the graveyard that have no enemies in them, those are transition rooms that are going to have the key gates that you unlock by beating either Raid Cruncher or Gutter, depending on the area. Here we have the first enemy of the graveyard area. There's only 3 right now. This is the Bone Gremlin. The Bone Gremlin's essentially the melee counterpart of the Skull Guard from Wasteum. So we have a Wasteum reference, so that's neat, I guess. They take 6 shots and are just faster growths, essentially being better versions of the hunts. A lot of the new enemies are relatively simplistic, because From the Waste is more of a game about playing with the tools in your arsenal rather than learning how enemies interact with each other. Hollow Waste 2 probably has the best enemy roster in the entire Waste series, but it has probably the most simple gameplay loop out of all of the Waste games. Technically, Hollow Waste has the same gameplay loop, but since you move faster and shoot faster in that game, yeah. Anyway, these are the Gorjaws. They're essentially just growths with more health. 12 health to be specific. If you're killing them revolver only, it's kind of a slog, but by this point in the game, you're guaranteed to have the Saw Blade Launcher and one other weapon. I'm probably going to give Gutter a ammo weapon as well to compensate for the fact that Raid Cruncher has one. So that's why these enemies in the graveyard are quite tanky compared to the enemies of the desert. It's in fact why the desert enemies are so frail. You're only guaranteed to have the hammer and the revolver by the time you fight them, with the exception of Bubba and the Hunter. Technically, you fight Elite Raiders before you have the Saw Blade Launcher, as FRM summons them. This is the Elite Scout. He's the odd one out of the graveyard enemies, but he has a shotgun projectile and an AoE projectile attack. He's neat. 20 health. He's a pretty simple boss overall. I mean, not boss, enemy. But he's neat. There's his death animation. He might seem like he's the odd man out, which he kind of is, but he has, like, you know, the cyborg clanker thing going on, where he's like a friggin' corpse, kind of, or the heavily damaged body kind of cyborged into a friggin', not cyborg, stitched into a friggin' robot. If you look in his mouth area, he has a bunch of, like, random flesh bits dangling from it. Anyway, not a lot to say about Gravedigger here. He's been unchanged since the last time I talked about him. I'm just doing this because why not? After this we go to the sewer area, which is completely finished. The friggin' graveyard is only half finished. As, you know, Bane is the halfway point of the sewer. I guess I can talk about the X. This is the X. The X is a weapon that changes damage, how much damage it does based on outside circumstances. Right now it's at 5. I'll talk about what those outside circumstances are later. But, yeah. And you only have one of them. You can only hold one at a time, so that's neat, I guess. The X is currently the worst weapon in the game, since you can't even fully upgrade it right now. You will be able to later. I just haven't implemented all of the upgrades yet. Anyway, the next friggin' thing would go here if you hit the second bed of the friggin' graveyard, but that second bed does not exist since the graveyard's not finished. Now we're going back here. I guess I still have to fight Gutter. This would be where you fought Gutter, but since the key system isn't implemented, I have not fought Gutter yet in this run, so nothing goes here, and nothing will go here. Oh, I guess I do have something to talk about in the Gutter section, so I will be going there right now, actually. Let's talk about the Car Raiders. They're a weird thing. Let me go back here so I have full ammo for the Saw Blade Launcher. That'll make this a lot easier. So, the Car Raiders. The first 2 rooms of the Gutter section are the same as the last time I showed them. It's the third room that's the weird one. This here is the Car Raider. The Car Raider takes 10 shots to kill, and every time you shoot it, it gets slower. Until it dies, and it leaves its car behind. Now, it's essentially gameplay-wise a reverse foil from Hollow Waste, and I guess Hollow Waste 2. But once you touch the car, you are in a car. Froth now moves twice as fast, I'm pretty sure. If you ram into an enemy, the enemy dies instantly, but you lose the car. I think it's a neat little system. If you're touching the car, if you're touching anywhere near the friggin' Raider, you kind of automatically pick up the car. I'm gonna have to do a lot of bug fixes on that. But yeah, if you crash into an enemy, instant death. So that's neat, I guess. But you lose the car in the process. Froth literally picks up the car with his bare hands and beats the enemy over the head with it, which I think is that is so stupid, but I love it. So I'm not changing that like at all. I think it's great. Now, not a lot to talk about with Gutter here, but I'm going to show the fight anyway, because like I mentioned in previous devlogs, Gutter now has a death animation, but I did not show it in said devlog, as there wasn't a reason at the time to go up into his section of the prison area. Now there is. because, you know, I had to show off the carburetor thing. Gutter still needs a boss icon to the left of his health bar. He is one of 2 bosses that doesn't have that, the other being FRM. Now we're gonna have to. Oh wait, I have Fleshhound King head. That's the same noise the Fleshhounds made when they fired their breath attack in Wastem, so that's neat, I guess. But yeah, now the gutter section. I'm gonna change the icon here. Pretty much every other thing shows the enemy of the area rather than the boss of the area, you know? And this will spoil gutter if you check this before you go into the boss thing, so I'll probably change that one. It doesn't really matter, honestly, because who cares about getting spoiled about gutter, like the second least interesting boss in the game. But, Let's move up to the sewer. Long room because key boss, you know. Not a lot to talk about in this room here. It's pretty much the same as last time. It's just easier since you have the chain gun. Honestly, the chain gun's probably now the ideal way to kill the Gegs. Oh yeah, Knots. I don't think I've ever explained what his deal is. His head is a friggin' sausage. Ha ha ha, Knots, yeah. But, I think Knots is a funny thing, so I'm glad I drew him, but, I am gonna have to fight Natto in this run, too. Forgot about that. Anyway, we got this new room here. In between the first room and Glubbo. Glubbo came before the first room. Now he comes after. Just so you can have a chance of not completely demolishing Glubbo, and you actually have to put effort in to conserve your ammo. That's a cute concept. I'm gonna have to change the volume of that. That's kind of horrible. But yeah, time for Glubbo. Which the Saw Blade Launcher is still the best weapon to kill Glubbo. Because of course it is. Highest DPS. Well, that's not the highest DPS, but you know what I mean. Technically the highest DPS would be the shotgun, but I don't have that because it's not implemented, and I didn't feel like hacking the game for this run to get it. So, well, not really hacking the game, just going into the control object and changing that variable. But whatever. You know what I mean. I didn't feel like manipulating a run just for that. Natto is a bit easier now that you have access to the pretty much guaranteed access to the chain gun, because it'd be pretty dumb to fight Natto before getting the chain gun. Given that Raid Cruncher is a pretty easy boss. Natto's not that much easier though. Honestly, FTW as a whole will be a very easy game once it releases, but I'm kind of okay with that. I'd rather have a pretty... I'm going to go back and heal, actually, so I don't deal with that up there. But, So now it's time to talk about Scarabite, the other new enemy of the friggin' sewer area. Now, I do not remember how much health Scarabite has. I think he has 15. Yeah, something like that. The deal with Scarabite, though, is that he does the most damage of any... Not damage. His projectile is the fastest of any enemy projectile in the game, like I'll demonstrate. It's an absurdly fast projectile. The mini-boss, we gotta talk about the legendary Stankus. So Stankus just shoots a projectile in your direction, and then 4 other faster projectiles in each of the cardinal directions. Stankus has about 50 health, and once he reaches 35 health, he changes a little bit. He takes a vial, and boom, Wormy phase, where he's a lot faster, and he spreads a trail of blood behind him. He mutates, drinks a vial, and Wormy phase. He only has 15 health in Wormy phase, so it's pretty easy, and he no longer shoots, so yeah. I just think that he's a cool inclusion to just break up the sewer a little bit, yeah. Anyway, now it's time to talk about the King. So the King is another boss in the friggin' Sumer Nausea Giant style, where big boss background, you know. I think this is the best version of the formula, though, by a long shot. And it's not even close, considering he has, like, actual attacks that require effort. He's still one of the easier bosses of this point in the game. Like, he's easier than Natto by a pretty decent margin, but he requires effort, and I like the fight, honestly. He has a pretty cool atmosphere. The idea is that this is a pit at the end of the sewer, and on the other side, there's like a completely different area you just can't access. And the King is just the guardian at the end of the sewer. I barely didn't get hit by that. But yeah, he's got 3 moves. He's got the AoE slam when he hits the ground with his fist. He's got the projectile he shoots from his mouth. And he's got the horn ram attack. Also, the screen shake thing. This is the only boss in the game to do screen shake, and there probably won't be any others. It's just that like a separate camera object had to be added to this to make it work from like a perspective standpoint. And while I was at it, I just implemented camera shake for this boss fight, you know, because it had to have a specialized camera. So I was just like, might as well add the camera shake. So whenever he slams, hits his horn into the wall, or even just walks, there's a little bit of camera shake. More camera shake for the slam, obviously, instead of over the walk. Because he has about 200 health, which is currently the most of any boss, as Natto and Gravedigger both have 120. The refight with Fink that I mentioned in the previous devlog also has 200. I'll probably buff that, though. But yeah, I think the King's a pretty cool boss. Let's talk about, like, cheesing this fight. It is genuinely easier to just stand in front of the boss like that, back out of range, and then go back in range than using this thing down here to avoid his attacks. If you use that, you can use this, but that projectile attack he does, you can avoid it if you duck out of the cubby, but at that point, the fight literally requires more effort than just fighting him the intended way, so it's not really a cheese strat. That's kind of really all I have to talk about in the video right now. One more thing, I guess. I can tease this because I think it's a cool little detail. So, well, it's not really a detail, but anyway. So, let's talk about the friggin', Let's talk about the friggin', X for a second. I briefly mentioned this. It's the worst weapon in the game by a wide margin. So you go up here. The X, it's for the side quest. The way to get the X itself has not been implemented yet. But just look at the X, right? It's essentially a shuriken. I'm going to go ahead and kill every enemy in this room. There's a reason I'm demonstrating this in this room, right? So I got the X, rotating it. As you can see, it's just a shuriken. I go up into this room here, and the X turns a fiery blue color. Or a shadow blue color, I guess. You know what I mean. I'll show off why that is in a second. So, if you go into a room, any room where the X starts glowing blue, and you throw the X, you will summon one of the punks. This here, the punk of the prison, is Punk Green. Punk Green doesn't have any, he's essentially a mini-boss in function. You can't leave the room once he spawns. But Punk Green has about 40 health, and only shoots with his gun. He'll get a special move later, more than likely a shotgun thing. But he's a very simple mini-boss, and there are 4 of these punks scattered across the waste. Every time you beat a punk, the base damage of the X is increased by 5. There's kind of a glitch where the global punk variable is still active after they kill you, because, you know, I need to change that, but whatever. There are 4 of them. They're all essentially palette swaps of each other, functioning the same way, but they have slightly different health values, slightly different speed values, they're slightly different fire rates, their projectiles move at a slightly different rate, and each one of them has their own special move. Green will be the shotgun, white will be summoning an exclusive enemy, the trigger, which you guys have not seen yet because you guys haven't seen white yet. Blue and red have not been added at all, but you guys will see them in a future devlog once all of the punk business has been added. Now, once you beat all 4 of the punks and the X is quote-unquote fully charged, you can go into a secret area, and in that secret area there will be secret stuff to do and a secret boss to fight, which will probably be the hardest boss in the game. That's the current plan. Some of that's finished, some of it's not. You'll see more of it in the next devlog, possibly.